That's right. Hi.
Hey.
So we are here for the endorsement interview for House District 44. And sometimes get the numbers wrong. We got the numbers wrong earlier today.
It's all good.
So we'll spend about half an hour and get to know you a little bit and figure out, I would say, whether we should endorse you or your opponent, but your opponent did not deign to show up. So I think it may end up being a fairly easy decision.
All right.
Why don't you introduce yourself to our editorial board and to the 37 people watching at home?
Yeah, my name is Travis Nelson. I'm a recently appointed state representative, but I've been a nurse now for about 20 years. Was born in rural Louisiana. We were very poor when I was younger. Left Louisiana and came to the Pacific Northwest in search of better life and opportunity, and ended up landing in Kennewick, Washington, which is where I grew up and graduated from high school. Worked as a janitor, landscaper, did a lot of odd jobs before I made the decision to go to nursing school, and it was the best decision I've ever made. Went on to do medical surgical nursing, emergency room nursing, critical care nursing, inpatient rehab nursing, and then went on to do work for the Washington State Nurses Association, and then served in leadership with the American Nurses Association, serving as the co-chair of the American Nurses Association Leadership Society for a while, co-chair of the ANA PAC board, vice chair, of the ANA PAC board for a while, and then vice president of the Oregon Nurses Association.
And you were appointed, I guess, this summer when Speaker Kotek decided to make a run for governor.
Actually, a little earlier than this summer, yeah. So I announced that I was running last fall when Tina Kotek announced that she was running for governor. And the thinking at the time was, okay, look, we're going to announce, we're going to run to win in the primary, and then you take office in 2023. What actually ended up happening was Tina ended up resigning, and I was appointed in January to fulfill her seat in the legislature. Served in the short session and won the May primary. And so technically I'm an incumbent legislator.
Do you have an opponent? You have an opponent this November, right?
That's what they tell me.
Have you gotten to meet this opponent yet?
I have not met my opponent yet.
What are your impressions of Salem after one short session?
It's the building is the people's building, and there's a lot of good things that have gotten done and can get done in Salem.
What surprised you the most?
What surprised me most? I think how generally nice the Republicans were to me. Yeah, they were generally pretty nice.
Were you not expecting that?
I wasn't. I mean, I'm coming in as the black LGBTQ liberal North Portlander, and so I think I expected a little more hostility than I received. But generally speaking, people were pleasant in interactions, and I was able to vote for some of their things and find common ground in some areas.
What bill are you most excited about introducing in this next session?
Bill I'm most excited about introducing. I'm not going to say a single bill because there's a lot I want to see around workforce, and there's a lot of work we've got to do around healthcare. So retaining healthcare workers and addressing our staffing challenges in healthcare. I want to be a part of that work and plan to be.
What kind of nursing are you doing these days?
So I work for the Washington State Nurses Association, doing rep work, and I have negotiated union contracts for them in the past. That bucket of work is done. And I also do employee health nursing for a major healthcare system in Oregon.
Got it. So are you working in Oregon or Washington? Sorry,
Both.
Both, okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. What do you see in Washington that's working that's not working here?
What do I see in Washington that's not working in Oregon. You know, the states are so similar in a lot of ways, and a lot of the challenges are similar. I think Washington's has done more on even though they've got nursing challenges, they've done more on nursing pipeline work than Oregon has, and that's something we've got to do better on, especially as it relates to instructor pay. I don't know if you know this, but if you are a new grad in Oregon with an associate's degree, coming right out of school into your very first job, you are oftentimes making more than a tenured 20-year instructor with a doctorate.
That's probably fairly frustrating for the tenured person with a doctorate.
And it makes it difficult to keep people in instruction, which is part of the reason we're in the problem we are with the nursing and healthcare worker shortage.
I'm really just fascinated by the question of what the condition of hospitals are these days.
Horrible.
Tell me more.
Absolutely horrible. I went on a tour of OHSU, I believe it was last week, and went down to their ER. And as a former ER nurse, when I was doing ER nursing, if you had to put someone in the hall, like, you were really busy. Like, the goal was to give everybody a private room so that everyone's healthcare information was protected, right? And what was happening to them was protected. And these days, the ER halls are full. They were full when I was at OHSU, and that's a common occurrence around the Pacific Northwest. We're in a position, frankly, where we have not done a good job of keeping the nurses and healthcare workers that enter the workforce in the workforce. I'm a big believer that we've got to focus on retention. The Hospital Association, they would tell you, hey, we've got to get people in the door, we got to get them in the door, but I don't know if you know any nurses or healthcare workers. If you have an honest conversation with them, I'm almost willing to bet you they will tell you how bad or how horrible things are. And a lot of that is just because of the healthcare, the culture of healthcare. So if we're going to get people out of the hallways in hospitals, if we're going to get people out of the hospitals into skilled nursing homes and into other types of facilities, we've got to do a much better job of retention with workers.
What do you think's changed? Do you think that hospitals have just lost staff, or do you think you just haven't staffed up to accommodate for more people coming in?
Oh, I think it's a loss of staff. I think it's a loss of staff. I think it's during the pandemic, you had a couple things happen, right? Like, you had COVID hit, and that shook some nurses. You had some of the vaccine mandates that took a hit with some of the nursing workforce, and then with just the census being high all the time, we've gotten into this vicious cycle where census is high, you're asked to do a lot, nurses burn out, they leave the workforce, which creates more of a shortage. Hospitals ask their workers to put 2,000% in, workers burn out, and that's just a vicious cycle that we've gotten into that we've got to interrupt.
When were you last an ER nurse?
Oh, I last did patient care in an ER probably 2011-ish.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if, how often you're actually in ERs these days, if at all, but just the meth usage, I hear from people in healthcare, especially in the ER, that meth patients show up. Their job has just changed so critically, because 10 years ago, not that meth wasn't a problem, but anecdotally at least, it's gotten a whole lot worse now. Have you seen that at all?
Well, I will say I still have friends who work in ERs, and I'm still in ERs and doing different kinds of work to various degrees. And the meth has gotten worse from everything that I've heard. We've also seen an explosion in untreated mental health conditions, and at the same time we've seen a contraction of mental health beds. And so what you see in hospitals and ERs is a backlog of psych patients. I think that even hospitals would tell you that, right?
They tell us that all the time.
Yeah, we've got this backlog of psych patients. or patients who just don't need to be here, but they need to go to a lower level of care in the community, and there's just nowhere for them to go because of staffing. You know, the physical bed is there, they just don't have anybody to take care of the patient. And I know, if you talk to any healthcare worker, they can tell you people they know that have left healthcare and are like, I'm not going back. That was horrible. I'm burnt out. I was treated badly. You know, when you talk to nurses about the number one reason, and I've seen the data, the number one reason why they've left, it's because of staffing and how badly they were treated by their employers.
Wow.
Yeah.
What can the legislature do to fix that backlog on psych patients?
Oh, well, we've got to figure out a way to create more community beds. I think we've got to incentivize the payment, increasing payment. I think rates need to be even better. And we've got to do more to, I think, incentivize healthcare workers who've left to come back. And I also believe that at the same time, we've got to do all that we can to incentivize healthcare facilities to be better employers, right? Because if we're able to find ways to incentivize people to come back who've left the workforce, and we know those numbers are significant, and they're still working in crappy conditions, they're not going to stay.
Here's what I find confusing. Not about your position, just about like the condition of healthcare in Oregon generally. Hospital systems like Providence are sitting on an enormous amount of reserves. And nurses and other people working at hospitals are frustrated by the conditions, frustrated by the short staffing, frustrated by the pay. Well, that's an easy solution. There's a lot of money. What's wrong with the hospital?
You know, I know there's a lot of money there, and I think hospitals could do more. And what you're saying with a lot of the union contract world is that
there's constant friction around the labor contract.
Friction, but what nurses are getting and healthcare workers are getting in union contracts isn't terrible. By and large, right? It's beating what a lot of people are getting who don't work in a unionized environment. I'm a big believer that we've got to retain. We've got to focus on retaining what we have, and then the culture has to change to make hospitals and healthcare facilities better places to work. I'm somebody who left the bedside because I hated how I was treated. It's not first of all, if you're a healthcare worker, oftentimes you're working a 12-hour shift, sometimes a 16-hour shift, sometimes a 24-hour shift, depending on what the need of the facility is. During that 12-hour shift, oftentimes you're lucky if you get a 30-minute break. You might get another 15, and you're on your days off. You're constantly being called. You're never told. Thank you. You're always being told what you didn't do right, what you need to do better, and you're being told to do more with less. I think if we treated people a whole hell of a lot better, I think a lot more people would stay in healthcare and wouldn't leave. We wouldn't have the burnout and turnover rates that we see.
So you're basically making the opposing. You know that kind of famous meme from Mad Men where she says like, "You never say thank you," and he says, "That's what the money is for." You're kind of making the opposite argument, right? That like in fact it's not the money. That if people were treated better on the job, that they might stick around.
It's not all about the money, no. And when you look at and for the nurses who it is about the money for, they leave and they go travel, right? Because, you know, if you're a travel nurse, even right now, you're making over $100 an hour. And those jobs aren't full. So the nurses who are staying at the hospital and the healthcare workers who are staying at the hospital, that's the staff who's dedicated to doing that work in the building. In my experience and in conversations I have with them, they want to be treated better, and they don't feel that in general, they don't feel that the employers are doing what they can to really, you know, show their appreciation for their sacrifice and hard work.
So what do you think lawmakers, now that you have you're now a member of two different bodies, nurses and also lawmakers, what do you think that your new colleagues can do to solve that problem? Because it has to be solved and fast.
On the retention front, I've already had conversations with the hospital association and one of the bigger hospital systems about some things I think they should be doing, because some of the feedback I'd gotten when I was talking about retention is we've done everything we can think of, and so I sent a list of like 20 things that I thought that they could do, just based on conversations I've had with healthcare workers. I think the legislature may have a role in incentivizing hospitals to do some of those things. Long term, we've got to, like I said, is pay instructors more. We've got to open up the pipelines, and we've got to incentivize workers to come, who've left the profession, to come off the sidelines.
Sophia, questions?
Do we have a bigger workforce problem or retention problem than other states, or is this a everywhere problem?
I'm not hearing that it's everywhere. It's a lot of the country, but the problems here in Oregon are pretty significant. We're a state that has, may not be the least, but it's near the bottom when it comes to critical care beds per capita. And so, when you lose one of those highly trained nurses and you don't have a lot of those beds, which means a staffed bed to begin with, it has a big impact.
Mm-hmm. We were already among the lowest states on staffed beds per capita
Absolutely.
in the union, well before COVID or any of these current crises.
And so that's my point. So if we're near the bottom there, states that are higher up, they can afford some loss and not feel it the way that Oregon
They have
does.
some cushion.
Yeah, they have some cushion.
One thing that I've been wondering about is, we shut down the sobering center because people there weren't equipped to deal with people who were high on meth.
Mm-hmm.
And then we didn't replace it with anything. But, the natural other place that people go, it's either jail or the ER. And we know neither of those are appropriate places for people high on meth.
Right.
I mean, what are things that on the legislative level the state can do, if anything, to somehow fill that gap? And not necessarily just we need better, we need better XYZ, but as far as in putting money into the city-county joint, plan. I know they have their, I don't remember what it's called, I think the Beacon Center maybe. It's the one that isn't built yet and they don't know where the money's coming from yet. Mm-hmm. Do you see the legislature having a part in either funding that or doing something about finding a third option for these people that's not jail or ER?
Yeah, and again, I'm a new guy to the legislature, but I think that's part of what the Measure 110 conversation is about, right? The focus there was on harm reduction, and we've got to do more to put more of a focus on treatment. And I'm hopeful that we can take a look at how those dollars are being used and use some of those dollars to bolster treatment, because God knows we've got to do something, because I think we'd have a lot more people who were either managing their addiction better or would be getting off of drugs completely if they just had treatment options. I had a lady in my district office in North Portland a few weeks ago who was just telling me about what she was dealing with her daughter, and there was a window where her daughter came to her and said, "Mom, I'm ready to get clean now," and there was nowhere to send her daughter, and there was a wait list. I want to say the wait list was 3 or 4 weeks, and a couple days later her daughter was back out on the street and missed that window of opportunity.
Which can be quite narrow.
Is there anything the legislature can do? I mean, is it just a waiting game at this point for those dollars to get to where they need to go is it just wait and see?
Yeah, I think, the legislature, when it comes to mental health, as I understand it, the legislature's job is largely to ensure that municipalities, county, city has the dollars that they need to create the capacity for treatment in the county and the cities.
Yeah.
So it's a partnership, and it has not been as effective as it could be in recent years.
Moving on to different topics.
You don't want to talk more healthcare with me?
I've enjoyed it.
It's cool, it's okay, so you have very niche knowledge about something.
Oh, this is a good question I should ask, so it's not the last question I asked. What's your age?
I'll be 44 next month.
So on election day, how old will you be?
On election day, I will be 43.
Wait, but on October 19th.
He'll still be 43.
Yeah, I'll be 43.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. It's
How much money have you raised this cycle? How much are you spending on this?
I actually have not looked at the total I've raised recently, but I think it's about $100,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any idea who your biggest donor is?
Oregon Nurses Association.
I would ask you why they like you, but I think I already know that. Can you demonstrate an independence from the Democratic caucus? We ask this to everyone, but everybody who comes in here, is there a position that you've taken or that you take or you're going to take that would place you at odds with the party in general?
I took a couple in the short session.
Okay, tell me about it.
Yeah. The one I will point out that that comes to the forefront of my mind. There was a bill that was Shelley Bashar Davis's bill, Republican, and it related to increasing penalties for people who assault healthcare workers. And given my background and knowledge, I felt that was the wrong road to go down, and most of my colleagues supported it. There was a lot of robust conversation, and I ended up being a vote no on that when most of our caucus voted yes.
Why did you feel that was the wrong road?
Because I don't think when people come into an ER or when they are in the hospital with a relative or with a child, they are stressed out, right? They are at they're at their wits' end. You know, think about it, right? You're with your mom or your child who has end-stage cancer or has some type of heart or lung disease, and I think most of the time when people assault healthcare workers, they're acting out of their character. In my experience, and my belief is, if hospitals and healthcare facilities did the work and put the effort into making those facilities safer, that would dramatically decrease assaults on healthcare workers. So for instance, ensuring that any confused patient has somebody there sitting with them at all times and not cutting that person just because you're concerned about the budget. Ensuring that there are enough rooms with cameras to watch people who may be confused or have dementia or Alzheimer's, or have windows on those rooms so that you can watch people before they escalate. Mm-hmm. Ensuring that your staff have de-escalation training every single year. Find me a healthcare system that ensures that their staff, all of their staff, because you act as a team in healthcare, have annual de-escalation training, and ensure that their staff are competent when it comes to de-escalating an escalated patient. In my experience, a lot of assaults, there are unnecessary assaults that happen when staff are not competent to de-escalate a patient who's confused or escalated.
I think this is a fascinating answer because in some ways you demonstrated not only independence from the Democratic caucus, but independence from your coworkers in nursing to a degree here.
Yeah, well, it's real interesting because part of the argument was
it'd be like me voting to not increase penalties for assaulting journalists.
It's a controversial issue amongst healthcare workers. Part of Shelley Bashar Davis's argument was that ONA at their convention voted to support this type of legislation, and that's true. But that was a very narrow vote. If I'm recalling correctly, it was like 52 to 48.
What was the debate? I assume went along the same lines.
It went along these same lines.
Describing.
Absolutely.
Do you think kind of that a bill like this lets hospitals off the hook?
I think it lets hospitals off the hook. Absolutely. I think you can increase the penalty, right? But if you are escalated because you are dealing with an extremely stressful situation in the hospital, knowing that assaulting a healthcare worker is going to be a felony and not a misdemeanor probably isn't going to stop you.
Unlikely. It's the worst day of your life.
It's the worst day of your life. Yeah. There's a lot that hospitals can do to make the places, like I said, brighter. Training, just keeping people from being escalated to begin with. There's a lot of data and research on this that I've seen over the years, and I'm a big believer that increasing the penalty is not going to do nearly as much as doing hospitals and healthcare facilities doing more to keep their employees safe.
Okay. You're succeeding Tina Kotek up in North Portland. What are you hearing about her from her constituents now that you have her old job?
Tina's constituents love her. She was reelected time and time again. Overwhelmingly, I was very happy to get her endorsement in the primary, and when I knock doors, people are generally positive about Tina and her track record and what she was able to do for the district.
Has the district's boundaries changed in any meaningful way from what it was a year ago?
It's a little different, The population growth has been in Portland, so things have kind of been pushed up towards the Columbia River. So there's for instance, St. John's and the Bridge used to be in the district. The Bridge isn't in the district anymore. Cathedral Park is now part of Maxine Dexter's district. I know, right? Part of the district used to go past 205 to the east. Now it stops at 205. So there's been some change.
It's tighter, in other words,
it's
geographically, because there's more people living.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. I don't have any other questions.
I'm good.
And we promise we'll get you out of here in half an hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very last question we're asking it to everyone in this cycle. It's the fun question. Put quotations around fun. If the world were ending tomorrow, you have a last meal, what's one item that has to be on the menu? I understand that the menu might be quite expansive, but one item that has to be on there.
The sweetest, juiciest peaches you've ever tasted.
Great answer.
Thanks for coming in.
All right.
Good to meet you.
Representative, it's a pleasure to meet you.
All right. Good to meet you.